Pranav from the Tars team, and today I want to briefly discuss how and why you should make your chatbot look the part for your marketing campaigns. Branding is a super important part of marketing. It helps you create a unique identity that is easily identifiable for your prospective customers and for your existing customers, and it helps you stand out from your competition. So it's super important that you have a coherent brand identity throughout your company, and that includes your chatbots and your conversational landing pages. In terms of the elements on the page for a chatbot or a conversational landing page, there are usually 4 elements that you need to keep track of and you need to pay attention to when it comes to designing your conversational landing page. And those 4 elements are first, the page area. So the page area is this white space that you can see around this chat square. So all the way on the edges of the page, you can see there is a white area with a little bit of a shadow over here. That is the page area. The second element that you need to pay attention to is the chat area. So this is the white space around the chat bubbles within this rectangle over here, all of this white space over here. And then the third and fourth elements that you want to pay attention to are the bot message bubbles, so the purple ones up here, and the user message bubbles, so the blue ones that appear as the user responds to messages from the bot. In terms of how you should actually decide the colors for each of these elements, you're probably the best judge of that because you know your brand best. But when people approach us and ask us to build conversational landing pages for them, we have a fixed approach that we use. And I'll share that with you guys in case you need a little bit of guidance in terms of how you can approach the design process more easily. So the first area we always decide on a color for is the chat area. So it's the area inside the rectangle over here in between the chat bubbles. And the reason we decide this area first is because it is connected to every single other area that I mentioned before. So it makes contact with the bot message bubbles over here. The bot message bubbles are on top of the chat area. Similarly, the user message bubbles are on top of the chat area. And the page area as well is right underneath the chat area. So whatever you decide this chat area color to be has to match with all of these other colors. So that's why we begin by choosing the chat area. And we have 3 different approaches to choosing the color for this element. The first is what you're seeing on your screen right now. We either go with a plain white for this area, and we usually choose this approach when the existing landing page also has a plain white background. So as you can see over here, Ally Bank's traditional mortgage landing page has a white background. So in their conversational landing page, we also added a white background to the chat area. The second approach that we use for the chat area is in the case that the chatbot is being used as a widget on the page. If the first fold of the page uses the primary brand color, so over here, this is our web page, it has purple in the background of the first fold. We try to make the chatbot background that same color. So again, over here, we've added purple in the background so that it maintains coherence. The third and final approach that we use is to add a logo in the background of the chat area. So right now I am on the Montana DMV's website, and as you can see in the background of their chatbot, they have the Montana DMV logo. I have another bot of theirs open in a new tab over here, and as you can see, their logo is there in the background. We generally take this approach when we haven't used the logo elsewhere in the image, because a logo is a good way of adding branding to the chat experience. And if you don't have it anywhere in the messaging flow, then that logo is not going to be there at all in the chat experience, and you're missing out on a key part of your branding. So if you're not including the logo in your messaging flow, include it in the background. Maybe add a little bit of a fade or a blur to it like the DMV is done over here. If I switch back to the Ally Bank conversational landing page, you can see that we have the logo in the messaging flow itself. It's there in this message over here. So as a result, we did not add it to the background of the chat area. Now, the second element that we always decide a color on for is the page area. So once you've decided the chat area, you can go ahead and decide the page area. And we generally go with one of 2 approaches for this. I either make the chat background, the page area background white in color, especially if I'm using a logo, if I'm using a white chat area color. So if this chat area color is white, I also make the page area color white because it just feels like the chat box over here is an extension of the rest of the page, and it makes it feel a little bit more seamless. And the second approach I like to use for this page area is to actually have an image in the background. And a great example of this is over here in the Montana DMV's page. And I usually take this approach when there is a logo in the background of the chat area, or if the chat area has a color in it. Because you don't need that seamlessness from the white to the page area, the white of the chat area to the page area. You already have something in the chat area, so you can afford to add something more visually appealing, or something that stands out more visually in the page area as well. And that's when you can opt for the photo background. Now we can move on to my favorite part of these, of the way these chatbots look. It's the message bubble color. So now the message bubble color, again, is going to be very dependent on the chat area that you choose, because these message bubbles have to stand out against the backing of this chat area. So there are a couple of approaches that we have to this as well. If the chat area is plain white in the background, or if there is a logo with plain white in the background in this chat area, we generally go with the brand's primary color. So if I go back to Ally Bank's page, you can see in their logo, their main color is purple, and it's there throughout their page as well. The writing over here is purple, the heading over here is purple. So we took that primary brand color and we made it the color of the chatbot. And you can intuitively kind of see why that makes sense, because the chatbot is a representation of your company. And if this is your primary company logo, it just makes sense to have, if this is your primary brand color, it's kind of makes sense to have the representative of your company have the primary brand color as their chat bubble color. If, however, you have used the chat area, you've used the primary brand color in the chat area, like we did in this chatbot over here, where our primary brand color is purple and the chat area is also purple, we generally choose a bot message bubble color that matches the secondary color of the brand in question. And a good way of finding out what the secondary color is, if you don't already know it, which you should, because you're probably making a chatbot for your company, is to just look through the page and see what the second most prevalent color on the page is. So in our case, we really just have purple, and then we have gray and white. So we just went with a neutral white color because it stands out against the purple, and it's the second most common color on our page. So that's the approach you can take if you are using the primary the primary brand color in the chat area of your bot. Finally, if you want to decide, or when you want to decide the color for the user message bubbles, this is probably the easiest one to choose. The approach we always take is just look at the CTAs on your page. What color are those CTAs? Make the user message bubble color that color. It makes sense because the user message bubbles are a representation of the user actually taking action on your page. So it is sort of the end result of them clicking or interacting with a CTA. So it just makes sense to transfer over your CTA color to your chatbot. So for example, over here with the Ally page, if I go back here, all of their CTAs are this bluish color over here. So we took that bluish color and we made it the user message bubble colors. Similarly, on our page over here, our CTAs are green at the top, as you can see over here. So we made the buttons over here green. That's pretty much it in terms of our approach. Feel free to experiment with this stuff because there's no correct answer. We just told you our approach because it works for us, and if you want to experiment with it, you can. If you have any questions about this, feel free to reach out to us or leave a comment below. We hope you guys enjoyed this video. Thank you.